Mark here from newhometricks.com. This is my first video of 2018. Took a little bit of a break over the Christmas and New Year period, but now I'm back, and today I want to talk about my Tado Smart Heating system and how I've been getting on with it. You may remember the last video that I put up on this topic was focused on how we got on with the install and the setup of our Tado heating system. So that included the smart thermostat itself. It also included the extension kit, which we had to wire into our boiler, and then of course the internet bridge so that the whole thing is online. So how have we been getting on with it over the last few weeks? Well, we've now had it in for a little bit of time, so I think we can give a reasonable assessment as to how we've been getting on with the system. But first I want to give a bit of an overview of the actual user interface for the app and how we actually interact with it. I'm going to start though with the actual smart thermostat itself and give a quick overview of how that actually works. So this is where we've installed the smart thermostat. It's kind of on the first floor, the middle floor of our home, so that it's not getting a temperature reading that's too cold downstairs or too warm upstairs. You don't really interact with this much on a regular basis. There is one single button that you can press on the front here, and if you do that, it shows the current temperature in the home and then scrolls off and shows you the set temperature. And you can use the up and down arrow buttons here to adjust the temperature temporarily, and we'll see a little bit more detail about what that actually does and how long that adjustment lasts later in the video when I go through the settings in the app. As mentioned, you don't really interact with this much on a regular basis. You can use it to override the temperature manually. Otherwise, it just sits here doing its job, recording the temperature, relaying instructions to the boiler via the extension kit. We've attached it to the wall here using a couple of command strips so that we can easily remove it and reposition it as we want. It's wireless and battery operated, but of course you might have wired it in your own home using a replacement for your existing thermostat if you already had one, in which case you might have wired it into your existing connection to the boiler. And of course, if you've done that, that would forgo the need for the extension kit. We didn't have an existing thermostat, as we saw in the previous videos, so we are able to use this in a completely wireless manner and position it wherever we like inside the home. So we may choose to move it at some future point, but for now this has been a good place to put it. So as you saw there, you don't really interact that much with the smart thermostat. You can adjust the temperature and see the current setting as well, but other than that, there's not much that you would really do with that on a regular basis. Primarily, you're going to want to interact with the Tado system using the app on your smartphone. So we'll take a look at the app now and give you a bit of a tour of the user interface and how the app works. Okay, so let's take a look at the app. As mentioned, this is primarily the place that you would come to actually interact with Tado and to make changes to your heating system, to review how things are going on. The app is divided into various sections on the main page. If we have a look at the top of the screen here, you can kind of see the current status. You can see the weather conditions and temperature outside. In large font in the middle here, you can see the current temperature as measured by the thermostat, and over on the right hand side the humidity. Over on the left you get a little icon that's showing a little icon of a house at the moment. This changes to a little icon of a person if it's in away mode, or a little icon of a hand if you engage manual override. Beneath that there are these three little wavy lines. Now this isn't just a fun little icon, this actually corresponds to, if I tap on it, the current heat request, and as you can see it's saying heat request high at the moment. You'll get 1, 2 or 3 lines depending on the level of heat request that Tado requires, corresponding to low, medium and high. Now if you've got a system like ours where you can only really control the boiler whether it's on or off, then the heat request will be translated into how much of the time the boiler is active. So if it's a low heat request, the boiler will only run for some of the time. If it's a high heat request, it'll run for pretty much all the time, and medium is of course somewhere in the middle. If you have no lines at all, then it means there's no heat request at the moment and the boiler will be off. If you've got a digitally controlled boiler, you've got a much more modern system, then Tado is actually able to communicate the required heat level actually directly through to the boiler, and the boiler will modulate its heat output depending on how much heat is being requested by the system. So with modern boilers you actually get a better level of control. Now beneath that, in the middle here, there's this kind of grey bar, and that's got the current temperature on it. Now if you tap on that you can engage manual control, but I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. At the bottom of the screen you see a sort of symbol of a house here with a couple of circles around it. And then there's a couple of icons of users at the moment. If I tap on myself, if I tap on me, which is myself with a little circle around it, it shows my phone. This shows who's at home and who's away. So if any one or indeed all users are away from home, then all of these little icons will be further out from the home. Whereas if someone's at home, or if both people are at home, it'll show these icons actually in the middle of the circle over the house to show that you're at home or away. Over on the right hand side there's a little grayed out user icon, and if I tap on that, that's actually my PC. You can actually run the app on your computer. Of course that's not used for location services in any regard, so it's shown over here on the right hand side, but it just shows that there are additional devices registered even if they're not using location. Back to manual control. At the moment it's set to 21.5 degrees Celsius, and that's part of our automatic schedule that we've got running. But if I want to engage manual control, all I need to do is tap on this bar here, and it comes up and gives me the ability to control the heating. If I want to turn the heating off, which is as it's set to now, then I can do that. But even if you say that you want the heating to be off, it will still enable what they call frost protection, as you can see here. So that means it won't let the pipes in your home get so cold that the water in them freezes and potentially causes a burst pipe, which could of course do a lot of damage to your house. If you turn the heating on, you can then of course set your desired temperature, and you can adjust this up or down as necessary. Indeed, you can go all the way up if I crank this up to 25 degrees, or all the way down. If I crank this all the way down, I think this will let me go down to 5 degrees. Let's see how low we can go here. Yep, 5 degrees is the minimum that you can set this to. So you can, of course, make a lot of changes to your temperature and just set it to your preferred temperature at any time. So you can do this here. The question is, how long will this manual change last for? If you tap at the bottom here, you've got three options. The first is until next automatic change. Now that might be a change in schedule, that might be the next scheduled change, it might be somebody coming home or leaving home, but whatever you have set for manual control here, it will then end when the next automatic change occurs. Or you can put it on a timer, and you can specify in minutes or hours how long you would like the manual change to last. So let's say I want it to last for 6 hours. I could set it in that regard. And then if I go back, the last option is of course until ended by user. So that means that whatever manual change I make will effectively be permanent until I come back in and I cancel it manually. So that allows me to make those kind of changes. I'm not going to actually activate a manual control now, but this just gives you an idea of some of the settings that you can make. So if I cancel out of that, now how do we set our normal automatic schedule on the system here? Well, that's done in the top right here. There's a little icon of a calendar with a thermostat against it. If I tap on that, it takes me into my schedule here. Now you can see that I've got a different schedule for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, a slightly different one for Friday, and then a different one again for Saturday and Sunday. I don't have to have that level of granularity. If I tap on schedule days down here at the bottom, I can choose whether or not I want the same schedule every single day, Monday through Sunday, a different schedule for weekdays versus weekend days, or indeed a different schedule for every single day of the week, which is what we've got it set to at the moment. Now I can adjust these time blocks any way that I want. So for example, if I wanted to split up Saturday slightly, I can press on the little plus button here, and then all of these schedule blocks change to pluses. Tapping on any one of these effectively splits those into two different time blocks that I can then control independently. So if I tap on this, I can then go in and adjust the time block. I'll delete this now and put it back to how it was before. And that goes back there. I just need to reset the time to be what it was previously, and we're done. So I can adjust these time blocks very simply. So if I go into any one of these time blocks, I can show you how you can adjust this. You can of course say whether the heating is on or off during this period, and again, if you set the heating to be off during a time block, you'll still have frost protection. You change the start and end time as you want it, and then under the advanced settings you can define whether or not location-based control will be on during this time period. So if it's on, it means if everybody leaves the house, then it'll go into the away state. Now disabling location-based control for any given time block might be useful if you know that somebody's going to be in your house that might not be on the Tado system, a visitor, a worker, somebody for whom you'd like to keep the heating running for, but they're not going to be on your Tado system. So you can turn location-based control off if you want in here. We'll just cancel back out of this. Now, as it says at the top here, these schedules are active when somebody is home. So what happens when someone's away? Well, if I tap on the away icon at the top here, you've got a few settings that you can change. In away mode, what the system will do is it will turn the heating down proportionately based on what the set temperature is during that time block and also how far away you get from the house. More on that a little bit later on. But you can make adjustments to that because you can control using this slider here, and you can set anywhere between eco, balance and comfort. We've got it set to comfort at the moment, and as you can see in the description, Tado will preheat your home before your arrival. As you near your home, the target temperature will increase. When set to comfort, Tado ensures that your desired home temperature is reached shortly before your arrival. If you set it to eco, then your target temperature might only be reached after you've arrived home. And if you set it to balance, it'll be somewhere in between. If you set it all the way to off, then it means that Tado will only start heating your home after you've arrived. So it won't actually do any preheating at all. It will wait until you've actually got home before it actually starts doing the heating. So off is certainly something that would be very economical, but not particularly comfortable. Now, if I go back to the schedule screen here and tap on the little settings icon in the top right, there's one last thing that I want to show you, which is the early start feature of Tado. Now, with early start turned on, it means that the time blocks that you set are not necessarily the time blocks during which the boiler will be running. What you're saying is that you want the temperature to be at the set level in time for the start of that time block. And you're leaving it to Tado to figure out how far in advance it needs to actually start running the boiler in order to bring your temperature up to the desired level, as is shown in this little diagram here. If you want the heating to reach 22 degrees by 8 o'clock, Tado will figure out how far in advance it needs to run the heating in order to reach that temperature by 8 o'clock. If you turn early start off, then it means that your heating will start at the scheduled time that you've set in your time blocks. A little bit more like a traditional heating timer. The schedules will define when the boiler can run in a traditional sense. Having early start on is probably better because it means that you are having a different level of heating every day. It will start the heating at the right time based on how warm your home already is, what the outside temperature is, what it knows about how quickly your house warms up, all of that kind of stuff. So it means that you're probably getting better energy savings rather than trying to guess yourself when you need the heating to run. So early start is probably a good feature to keep enabled. If I go back to the main heating screen here, there's another icon to the left of the little schedule icon, little bar chart here. If I tap on that, the system goes into landscape mode, and I now get to see a little bit of a history graph of what the heating has been like in my house over the course of the day. Now, this is split up into a couple of different sections. The main portion of the screen here shows what the temperature has been over the course of the day. And if I actually tap and hold, it will actually come up and show me more details, and I can move my finger across the graph and it will show me exactly what the temperature inside the house was, including the humidity at any given time. And in the bottom right of the little label there, it'll actually show me what the set temperature was at that particular time, and it'll even show me the heat request, those three wavy lines that I mentioned earlier on. It changes colour to define what period we were in. So these blue areas, for example, are the overnight period where the heating was set to a very low temperature. The yellow period is when the heating was actually active and running with somebody at home. And then the green period, that's then away period, when we're actually away from home. So you can see the temperature change over the course of the day. If I let go again, and it goes back to the normal graph, there's these three icons on the right-hand side I can use to deactivate certain parts of the graph here. So the three wavy lines, that's actually showing me the heat request period. Darker shaded areas are when the heat request was high. Lighter shaded areas was when the heating request was low. If I tap on the little water droplet, that overlays the humidity level. And then this last icon is very useful as well. If I tap on this, it actually shows me when the sun was shining on the house. Now here today we haven't had a lot of sunshine, so if I go back to a previous day, let's go back to yesterday for example, you can see that there were a couple of short periods here when the sun was shining. It's not particularly warm at the moment, so it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but in some of the previous days during the last few weeks when we've had Tado running, I'll see if I can find one now, we have noticed that there have been marked differences when the sun has been shining to how warm the house has stayed when the sun has been shining on the house. So here's a good example. For example, on the 28th of December, when the sun was shining on the house, the temperature didn't really drop that much during that period. It was only when the sun went in that the temperature actually started to drop inside the house. So the fact that Tado is taking these kind of factors into account is very interesting to see, and it really does highlight some of the information that the system captures about the heat of your home. In fact, it is kind of addictive actually being able to go in and see all of this information at your fingertips and see exactly what the temperature in your house is, what it's been like over the course of the day. You can become a bit of an information junkie accessing all of this information. Over on the left hand side you've got a hamburger menu. It allows you to go in and access various settings. You can of course add devices. They've even got the ability to access boiler repair services in here. There's an energy savings report that I'll talk about a little bit later on. Of course you can go into the settings, and if I do that, you've got the ability to examine your current zones. Now, at the moment, we've only got one zone, the whole house. But if you add additional components, you can then have multiple zones. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But if I tap on the zone, it allows me to see a few details about the house. You can change, for example, what happens when you activate manual control using the smart thermostat, the physical thermostat itself. As you saw during the video earlier, you can adjust the temperature using the thermostat itself. But what does that mean? How long does that manual control last? As you saw earlier, if you activate manual control within the app, you can tell the system whether or not that lasts until the next automatic change, whether it's on a timer, whether it's until ended by the user. But you don't have the ability to make that distinction when you're actually interacting with the physical thermostat. So you can actually decide that in advance here within the settings. You can say manual control on Tado device, what happens, and you can actually define again, is that a change that lasts until the next automatic event, is it on a timer, or is it until ended by the user? So you can make some changes. You can enable or disable open window detection. If Tado detects a sudden drop in temperature, which might be a window being opened, then you can define that the heating should shut off for a certain period. You can actually say how long that period should be. We don't have that feature enabled at the moment, but we might look at using that in future. And then of course there are a few other settings. You can universally enable or disable the location-based control. You can adjust what the home area is. You can even enable things like home Wi-Fi detection, which they've added recently to improve location accuracy and reduce battery consumption. So there are a few settings that you can adjust here. You can change the home details. I'm not going to go into that now because that shows address details, things like that. And you can also go into the people section to see other users on the system. Again, I'm not going to go into that section at the moment. So there's a lot of different options in here, but largely once the system is set up, it should kind of run itself. But like I say, you might find yourself coming in here quite frequently if you have a system like this, because you can become a bit of an information junkie, being able to access things like these graphs and being able to see what's going on in your house. And of course, you can use this as a way to remotely control the heating in your house if you need to. So for example, if you're coming home late at night and you know that the heating's been off all day because it's been in away mode, but you're going to be returning home at a period when your heating wouldn't be running anyway, you might want to use this as a way of remotely activating the heating so that you're not coming home to a cold house. So you've got some nice features that you can use, and having that remote control capability is very useful. But because it has that geolocation-based control, in most circumstances you don't need to be remembering or thinking to yourself, oh, I'm going away, I'll turn the heating off, or I'm coming home, I'll turn it on. It'll just do it for you. So hopefully that's been a good overview of the app there. So hopefully that's given you a good overview of the app and how that works. But now that the system's been in for a little while, how have we been getting on with it? I've tended to find that the system has been working fairly well. It's working, there's been no problems, it's not broken down, it's not failed to heat the house at any point, it's been a pretty effective system. So we're happy with it in that regard. The geolocation feature generally works as advertised. When you are away from home, it goes into away mode, and it reduces the temperature proportionate on a couple of different levels. So it's proportionate to what your current set temperature is during that time period, and it's proportionate to how far away from home you actually get. So the further afield you go, the more it will turn the temperature down from that set temperature that you would normally have during that particular time period. So it is proportionate to those things. So when we, for example, commute to work every day, we don't tend to go too far away from home, so it doesn't turn the heating down drastically. So in a particular cold snap, it wouldn't let the house get so cold that it would then struggle to warm it back up again. But if we've gone further afield, and we have done a few times since we've had Tado installed, visiting friends, going away for weekends, that kind of thing, we've noticed that Tado has turned the heating down much more because we've been further away from home. So it is proportionate in that regard. One feature that we would like to see a little bit more control over is the away system, because it is supposed to warm your house up as you get closer to home. We have found that, particularly for our commute home every day, it's not necessarily warmed the house up quickly enough as we've been returning home, even when we've had it set to the comfort level. So it would be nice to have a bit more granular control here. Don't get me wrong, we've not come home to a freezing cold house or anything like that, but it would be nice to just have a little bit more control in this area so that we can get things just how we want them. The other area where I think that we've experienced a few difficulties is with the way that the temperature is measured in the house. With any central thermostat system like this, you're going to have a little bit of an issue. That issue is that you can only really measure the temperature in one location. Now, that sounds obvious, but it is of course something that you're going to have a little bit of a problem with if certain parts of your house tend to get warmer than other parts of your home. If you've only got one thermostat, you can only measure in one location. You're not able to see the whole picture, as it were. Now, this isn't necessarily a criticism of Tado. This would be a problem for any heating system where you have one central thermostat recording the temperature. And it's precisely why, with a system like Tado, you can expand it with additional smart thermostats, or indeed adding smart radiator valves. Tado have their own range of smart radiator valves. We've got regular thermostatic radiator valves throughout the house, and that does help to make sure that one room doesn't get drastically hot while another room is too cold. So using thermostatic radiator valves certainly helps to balance the heat throughout the house and make sure that you've got a good comfort level in your whole home. But having smart thermostatic radiator valves, such as the ones that you can add from Tado, will allow the system to be much more effective. You'll be able to have room by room control, and you'll be able to have even room by room scheduling if you wish as well. So one of the things that I really want to do in future is to add some smart radiator valves to at least some of the radiators in our house, so that I can have that granular control. Because as mentioned, this isn't really a criticism of Tado, it's just a bit of a drawback of having only one point in the house where you can measure the temperature when you might have different temperature levels in different rooms. So being able to add and expand the system is going to be a useful thing to do to make the Tado system much more effective to us. In every other regard, I've been pretty pleased with how it works. It's great having all of that information in the graphs so that you can see what your home's been like throughout the day. It's great being able to remotely control your heating, so if you're coming home at a time of the day when your heating might have been off, you can adjust things as necessary. You've got a much greater level of control in a much easier fashion than you might normally have with just a regular heating system. Let's face it, it's sometimes a bit of a pain having to fiddle around with a timer buried in a cupboard somewhere with a boiler, or mess around with a thermostat trying to get it to the right temperature. With Tado, it's a lot easier to do. It's just a lot easier to just access the app on your smartphone and adjust things to whatever you want them to be. And being able to do that from anywhere is fantastic. So I'm really, really pleased with it. Of course, the big question is, are we saving money? That's the main reason really why you might want to have a smart heating system, is to try and save some money by introducing a few more efficiencies into how your heating is operating. It's a bit of a difficult one to measure. Inside the Tado app, you've got the climate report. I touched on this in the user interface tour, but we didn't go into that. I can show you a bit of a screenshot here. It gives you a bit of a report and gives you a percentage figure as to how much energy it thinks it's saved using its features. It uses a few different metrics to calculate that energy saving figure, things like how long it's been in away mode, whether it's used open window detection, whether you've used the manual override feature to turn the temperature down at any point. But of course, what you really want to know is whether you've saved energy versus not having Tado at all. And that's a really difficult one to measure. I was hoping to use a smart meter that our energy provider installed earlier in the year on our gas meter to be able to get a bit more information on how much gas we've been using, but it's not been exposing all of the information that I would have hoped. So I think I'm going to have to take a bit of a longer term view and wait until we've had the system in for several months and then make a better evaluation as to how much energy we've been consuming and see if we can get a little bit of data in that regard. It's a bit of a tricky one to figure out though. Hopefully it is saving us money, and of course there are plenty of circumstances where it seems to be doing the job, turning the heating off or down when we've been away from home over weekends, visiting friends, that sort of thing, and naturally you tend to look at that and think, well, that's a brilliant example of a time when the heating would actually normally have been running, but we're not at home. And now we're able to see that the heating's actually been turning down or off because we've been away. So hopefully we are saving money in that regard, but I think we'll need to wait until we've had the system in for a much longer period to see whether it's actually impacting on our bills in that regard. So we'll wait and see and reserve judgment in that regard, and I'll of course report back if I feel that I've got more to share in that regard. If you'd like to read more about how I've been getting on with Tado, of course I've written up a companion blog post. You can find a link to that in the description below, or of course you can check out the website newhometricks.com. If you've liked this video, please share it. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.